I have a small favor to ask that takes you literally a few seconds. If you like the first 100 podcasts and the guests that we have invited so far, can you do me a small favor and give us a thumbs up on any podcast platform that you are listening on? It helps the podcast more than you think, because the higher we go on the ranking, the more interesting guests we can invite. Thank you again for your support.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Broadcasting from around the world, you're listening to The First 100, a podcast on how founders acquired their first 100 paying customers. Here's your host, Hadi Radwan.
This podcast is sponsored by All-in-One, the premier fantasy sports site that is on a mission to bring all sports fantasy games under one roof. If you are into football, the Euro 2024 is coming soon. Head to www.allinone.rocks. That's www.allinone.rocks and register for free for the first Predictor Game. You can create free leagues, invite and compete with your friends, and show your prediction prowess. May the best team win. Good to have you on the show, Gage. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for stopping by the podcast. Gage Caligaris is the founder of Ledgebrook, which is a tech-enabled MGA that is helping wholesale brokers get fast and easy quoting experience. And you've raised to date $32.8 million from notable investors such as Mark. You started the company 2022, so it's not that old, and you had the vision to simplify for the wholesale broker the insurance life cycle. What inspired you to start your company?
That's a great question. Yeah, we've been out there around 2 years now. And I think what inspired me was seeing some of the first generation of insurtechs out there. These folks had brought innovation to an area that really, the whole insurtech game didn't really start till 2015, 2016, even though Silicon Valley has been around 30 years. And so that made it seem more approachable to start something. And then with my background coming as an actuary who has that kind of inside knowledge of how insurance works, thought, okay, why don't we target an area that's a little bit more inside baseball, a little bit more niche, namely the wholesale E&S community. And so that's what clicked with me, kind of to combine the best of both worlds, that insurance knowledge with that insurtech type experience.
Yeah, amazing. If you tell our listeners, how does your product work? Like, what is the product? Who's your audience? And why is it special as compared to other competitors out there?
Sure. So our product is going to be a general liability policy. And so any middle market type company from a variety of industries, everything from manufacturing to construction, hospitality, restaurants, hotels, habitational. So everybody needs insurance. And if you are a mom and pop, that's a different market from us. If you're a super national Fortune 500, that's too big for us. There's a lot of companies in that messy middle where they need a little bit more service than an automated type offering. So that's where we come in. So our minimum premium on these policies is actually $25,000. We can go up to $500,000, but average premium is coming in around 65, 70 grand. And so it's something that does need two hands on the wheel. It does need somebody to look at it and underwrite it. But also in the market that we play in, a lot of these policies are coming in at the last second within 2 weeks of the effective date. So a lot of time with most insurance, your broker gets it to you 90 days out. They go out to the marketplace. There's time. In these cases, not so much. And so what we're providing to the wholesalers is that speed that is so desperately needed. First close to market, easiest to do business with. That's our value proposition. And that's something that has really resonated with our partners so far.
Amazing. So I would believe your customers are really the brokers, not the end users. And then in that case, talk us back how you managed to land the first 10, because it's very hard to break into the traditional wholesale broker, especially when you're saying I'm an insurtech.
That's right. So what we did was we ended up bringing in some of that insurance expertise I mentioned earlier. So our president, Steve Mills, 30 years in the business, president of the Hanover Z&S operation prior to that, had great relationships at the executive levels with these brokers. And then John Mullen, who leads our GL team, as well as some of the underwriters who report to him, had good relationships with the desk level folks as well. So at least we got our foot in the door doing that. But I would say to go from getting the contract signed and getting a couple of meetings to the binding business, that's something else entirely. And so the experience for us as we were getting off the ground is they were willing to send us to the business. And then as we continue to show up time and time again with fast quotes, picking up the phone, they say, okay, maybe there's something here. And so that kind of led to some binds, and then people started to tell their friends, and you know how it goes from there.
Amazing. So that is the early days of Ledgebrook. Take us a little bit forward to the first 100. What channels worked for you the most? Tell us anecdotes or stories that actually you tried but did not work in that case.
Sure. So I'd say as we went from the first few customers to the first 100, really, we started to see traction with one or two of these wholesale brokers at one time, right? So RT Specialty has been our biggest supporter to date. And so we were able to get early traction there. And then they started to tell other offices. So the way it works at these wholesalers is they're big, they're countrywide, but there's several folks who live in Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, Phoenix, all these different areas. So we were able to penetrate with one or two of these regional offices. Then they started to Philly tell Chicago, hey, these guys they're onto something here. You start sending them your stuff. And so kind of even within a partner that we were already working with and having success with, there was a lot of growth to be had there. And then actually kind of what got us in to have more traction with some of the other partners is that these wholesalers compete against each other too. So they may actually have the same policy at an Amwins or an RT or a CRC and an RT. So if we start winning a few of these things and Amwins down the street says, oh my, who are these Ledgebrook guys? How did I lose another policy to them? Then we've gotten some inbounds too. Like, can we get signed up with this? Because we want to use you as a market as well. So a little success breeds success in the marketplace.
Amazing. If you look at the wholesale brokering world, you're talking about folks who have multiple offerings or multiple products that are going to place it in front of their client. What's the secret sauce to make them give you more business? Especially when you're starting, you're not a well-known brand. So you will have competition more just from the brand awareness of the other big competitors. How did you overcome this?
That's a good question. So I think even to give you another example of where we've had success even within these wholesalers is with some of the more junior and up and coming brokers who are looking to build out their books. So the way this market is structured, the wholesaler is a broker's broker. So the customer goes to the retail broker who has a relationship with the wholesaler who then comes to us. So if you've been around for 30 years as a broker, you have your markets that you have all your friends in place. Do you really need Ledgebrook? Sure, it's a nice to have, but if you're coming up you need every edge you can get, basically, right? It's a very competitive market. So if you have Ledgebrook and you're showing your retailer, wow, look, I got you a quote. You sent me something. I got you a quote 2-3 hours later. That makes an impression on them, makes the wholesaler look good. And then they want to support you so that you can continue to provide this service so that we can grow our businesses together. And so focusing on the places basically where our value prop matters most, the speed, the last second policies with the younger up and coming brokers, that's where we've really been able to stand out and make a difference.
Amazing. I think when it comes to the success of the InsurTech, it's not only about the technology, it's also about the service, as you mentioned. And to be able to service your client, you have to have a superstar team. How were you able to convince people to join your company?
That's a great question. You can't, my smiling face, I guess. No, I think there's a maybe it's not a huge community, but it's a non-trivial group of people who really love insurance. I'd count myself among those, and who want to see our industry improve and who have tried to make change within the big companies. And it's just so very difficult, right? And so you get people who are at a point in their career where they know what they're doing, right? And have the energy to go out and build. That's a very attractive proposition to some folks. And then you get the startup equity and things like that on the compensation side. But really, I think the people who have had the most success at Ledgebrook and who have really enjoyed themselves the most are people who wanted to build and found this as an opportunity that they could start from scratch and be part of something cool.
Amazing. You've worked with Liberty Insurance before. What can you tell us about these incumbents that is really not working for them when it comes to technology? Where's that bottleneck that's preventing them from becoming tech-enabled, real tech-enabled, in your experience again?
Sure. Yeah. In my experience, I think first of all, there's a big tech debt that we don't have. So starting from scratch is actually a huge advantage versus starting with a 10, 15, 25-year-old system. Another thing in that realm is that a lot of these companies have grown by acquisitions. So even if they had one system, now they have five of them. And to even get them to talk to each other. So you're dealing with a baseline that's tough. And then in terms of the process of improving that, right, there is a desire to improve and innovate within these companies. But then there's a bit of bureaucracy involved in terms of getting projects pushed forward, the investments getting made. And then from a talent perspective, it's difficult to get your top Silicon Valley type engineers to come to a mega bracket insurance company. I think it would have been harder for me to recruit some of the people that I have now at Ledgebrook into the big Liberty, even though in one sense, that's a bigger insurance brand name, right? But in another's, our brand name resonates in this insurtech technology community. And so people understand that idea of what it's like to, okay, let's build something from scratch here. So from a talent perspective, that there's a gap there, I would say, at the legacy players.
You were in a nice paying job with Liberty Insurance and you made the shift to become an entrepreneur. If you want to give an advice to the listeners on when is the right time to do it and how can you maybe have a plan B or not when it comes to moving to a startup, because as a lot of startups fail and people are hesitant to leave their jobs and start something from scratch. So is there anything that resonates with your experience that has helped?
Well, I can say, I'll give you two kind of anecdotes there. I said, you asked me, when do you know is the right time? So one of the things that I thought was really helpful for me was I kind of got to practice a little bit from within the mothership. So the last couple of years I was at Liberty, I was part of the innovation group, part of the essentially internal incubator, building a mobility business, launching new products. So from that, I got to see, okay, do I actually like doing this? And am I any good at it? And the answer to both of those was yes. But then I think from there, I totally kind of flipped the script. For me, there is no plan B. And I decided in my mind that I was going to do this for the rest of my life, come hell or high water. And I think as there are the ups and downs in the startup world, that's something that's been very actually helpful, to be honest. There is no other option other than success. And so that can get you through some of the more difficult moments. And yeah, so that's kind of how my story has played out.
Amazing. So when you're starting as a CEO and a co-founder of the company, what should you know from day one to start a company, and what should you recruit for or outsource? Should you know everything related to insurance and technology, or should you know only technology, or should you know only insurance? How does it work?
Well, I hope you don't need to know everything before you start, because that definitely wasn't the case with me. I think you need to know enough about everything to be dangerous in terms of having a conversation, understanding how to recruit people, what the right vendor options might be. But really, I think the most important thing is to have a very clear vision of what you'd like to build, because that also helps in the recruiting elements and the fundraising elements. If you have a really clear kind of sense of where you're going, it helps people decide whether that's a journey they want to be on with you or not. And you're going to get a lot of no's, and that's totally fine, right? But as long as you are kind of staying focused on the direction that you want to go, over time, you can find some people that want to come onto the party bus with you.
Amazing. How did you validate your idea early on? Because when I look at the description of your company, you're in non-admitted and excess insurance. For those who know insurance, they do understand these terms, but they're putting you in a certain type of market. So how did you validate that I should be an MGA, not a broker? I should be non-admitted, not admitted. I should be in the excess, not in the, let's say, commercial or mass market option.
That's a good question. And it goes back a little bit to maybe one of your earlier questions. I actually spent about a year between the time I formulated the idea in terms of vetting out these very types of things. And so I was spending essentially all my free time on the weekends, waking up with the crack of dawn and kind of researching MGAs and different business models and things like that. I got my licenses. I became a licensed surplus lines broker in all 50 states during that period of time. So there was a lot of kind of steps I could take. But that whole process, I would say, took about a year to validate everything before I got to that point where I said, all right, there's no turning back. There's no plan B. Full steam ahead, for better or worse.
What has been the hardest thing in building your insurtech?
What has been the hardest thing? I'd say the hardest thing has also been what I enjoy most about it, which is that there's a new challenge every day. That's what keeps things interesting. It's what keeps me motivated to be able to solve new challenges. But at the same time, that's hard too, right? To have to wake up to a new problem in all areas, right? Like you're going to have people problems and distribution problems and reinsurance problems and product, and every day it's something new. So that's what's hard about being in a startup, but it's also what makes it really exciting and really gratifying when you start to see some of these things click and come together.
Makes a lot of sense. You've raised a huge round now, and hopefully it will mean success to you. What are 3 things that you mastered so that the investors put in, the insurtech investment ecosystem has not been the best because we've seen a lot of valuations go down. So what was your direction when you pitched to investors?
That's a really interesting question. I think one thing that about insurtech in particular is that insurance is complex, right? And it's not like super complex that you can't learn it, but it's more complex than a lot of times than you can pitch in 10 minutes, right? So for me, a lot of work actually went into simplifying the messaging, simplifying the story, dialing, and it still turned out pretty long and pretty complex, talking about all like the value chain and how we're doing this, that, and the other thing. But to really kind of be able to distill what we are into the most core elements. And then I can talk your ear off all day if you want to get into the details. So that's never been a problem. But I think one thing that helped the conversations was to be able to simplify upfront for folks who maybe who haven't been an actuary for 10 years, right? That's one thing I'd say.
Amazing. What is the principle that you live by that has served you well on your journey?
Oh, yeah. Here's the simplest one, the one I actually use the most every day. So every day I have my personal report card. It's not, do I succeed? Do I get X, Y, Z done? It's, did I have a great attitude? Did I try my very best? And was I good to the people around me? And I actually tell myself that every morning. I actually lay my head on the pillow every night and say, hey, did I have a good attitude today? Did I actually try my very best? And was I good? Did I get frustrated? Did I do my best in those? And if you keep adding, what I've found is if you keep adding up wins in those categories, the rest will take care of itself over time. And it's harder than it sounds, I guess, to keep consistently doing the blocking, tackling day after day. But that's kind of the principle I live by, and it's served me well so far.
Amazing. We'll put that in the show notes for sure. One last question, Gage. What's next for Ledgebrook?
Yeah, so what's next is we got this additional funds that you mentioned. We just raised a $24 million Series A. And so for that, it's all about expansion and scaling. We have 2 products in market right now that are doing well. We need to get product 3, product 4 out there, and then scale all of them at the same time, all while building the automation technology that's going to set up the next leg of our journey so that when we get to these really significant volume levels that we're kind of approaching already, where we're processing hundreds of submissions a day, we need to have that tech foundation super locked in. And so the path ahead of us is pretty straightforward, right? To do more of what we're doing and apply more technology to it. Easier said than done, but that's what's on the docket for the next year or so.
We wish you the best of luck. This is amazing news. How can people reach you, and are you hiring?
Sure. You can go to our website, ledgebrook.com. There's a number of ways to reach us through that. We're always hiring. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, feel free to reach out directly through the site, and look forward to speaking with you.
Amazing. Thank you for stopping by, and have a great day.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to the First 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.